Well, welcome back to Maryland Family Matters. My name is Jeff Trimbath, and I have the privilege of serving as the founder and president of the Maryland Family Institute. We're so glad you've joined us for our conversation today. We have a special guest with us, Dr. Dave Brat, who serves as the vice president of business engagement for Liberty University, a neighboring state to the west here in Virginia. Dr. Brat formerly served as the dean of the business school at Liberty. He served in Congress for several years. Before that, he taught economics at Randolph-Macon College in Virginia. So he's a real friend of ours. He is a trained economist, did his PhD at American University. But unlike most economists, he's also a trained Presbyterian pastor doing an MDiv at Princeton Theological Seminary. So he has thought very deeply about the connection between faith and culture and freedom and economics and all these wonderful issues. So we're very much looking forward to getting into some of these things today. And with regard to us at Maryland Family Institute, Dr. Brat, you will always have a special place in our heart because you were the first person that we ever invited to come to Maryland to address some audiences here. That was nearly 2 years ago.
Yep.
You joined us in Baltimore County. Talking to a group of about 80 or so patriots and then some of our donors the next morning. So you will always have a special place in our heart. Dr. Brat, welcome to Maryland Family Matters.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
The reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast is because a couple of days ago, you wrote an article for The Federalist about artificial intelligence. And just the title of that article contained two words that we don't often put together, and that is AI and virtue. I don't think many of us think about the concept of virtue with regard to AI. You were addressing a pretty serious problem you uncovered with AI. Can you talk about what that problem was?
Yeah, well, and the editors are much better at the titles. My first title was "Artificial Intelligence is not reason, nor Christian," and so there's all these debates on bias and the algorithms are biased and all this kind of thing. I didn't want to get in the weeds on all that. It's kind of boring. And so I wanted to situate it a little more deeper. And then I said, okay, you can go to the culture wars. And I gave some examples in the first paragraph. Of the left, says it's this. The White House says AI's, woke and this, that, and the other. But then I wanted to go a little deeper and root it theologically and philosophically. And so I just gave a brief little history of, Western civ, private property rights, the rule of law, Hobbes, John Locke. And that's if you want to go utopian and more toward the left, Rousseau, right, with the Emile. And Rousseau, according to Alan Bloom, whose book I recommended highly in that, the closing of the American mind, Rousseau was one of the few smart liberals. Right. Meaning he saw how big the project was. Human nature is corrupt. It is not good. And the extent to which you would have to change social institutions to get human nature to be good is immense. And he knew that and he tried to do it. And, the Marxists kind of took off from that. You could see that they want to take over all the institutions and try to form human nature in their own image. And of course, they flop every time. But all of our anthropologists went out to cover the ends of the earth and find the noble savage. And they came back, Levi Strauss and all these guys back 100 years ago. And they all come back and have to acknowledge, they were serious scholars back then, that human nature overseas was probably worse than it is here. We're more civilized here and our institutions are good. And then I went into the founders a little bit and how in the Christian tradition and the Judeo-Christian West were made in the image of God. And that's the unique thing, right? That piece right there is just huge. And so I sketched out, the founders and James Madison and that. And then I situated the ethics of AI, which if you go to Grok, which is Elon's thing. And we're forever thankful to Elon, right? So I was busting his chops a little bit, but he's right. Yeah. We're probably having free speech here as well. So thank you, Elon. But I critique the ethics of Grok. If you push Grok, and you can go do this, right? It's kind of fun to debate with Grok.
Yeah.
And you just say, hey, what, I see you're making some pretty strong statements, and you're saying I'm making strong statements. What do you mean that I'm making strong statements? What ethics are you guided by that you're judging my moral statements?
Yeah.
And it says, well, we follow the harm principle of Mill and Bentham and the utilitarians. And I said, well, utility, like in economics, is completely subjective, right? Hitler's utility maximization is totally different than Mother Teresa. They both view harm differently. They view the good differently. And this is the chronic problem in the West. And then I made a little pot shot and I said, if you went with the exclusivity claims of Plato, searching for truth, or Christian, St. Augustine, or Jesus, those are exclusive claims about the nature of reality and God's sovereignty over everything. It's not like God's just sovereign over Christians. Our view is he's sovereign over everything. And so I just tried to sketch that out and showed that the rationality, the Enlightenment rationality of the utilitarians is a very narrow strand of human reason that began with Socrates and, is still with us for those who want to pay attention.
And in this interaction you had with Grok, in the article, you talk about kind of summarizing it. You asked it this question: what is the strongest moral tradition? You asked Grok this. Tell us about the answer you got.
Yeah, well, Grok at first, on first pass, it said, well, we use the harm principle because that's the strongest moral tradition. It's just kind of a phrase in passing almost. I don't even think it meant it. And I said, well, of course that's wrong. Back to it, the Christian tradition is by far and away the strongest moral tradition in the West. And it says, no, you're correct. You're right. I know. So, that's problematic too, because in some sense you got AI morphing and changing its mind based on what the user's saying. So it's a mess on a lot of fronts.
So you push back on it as a Christian, and it sort of backed off and said, oh, right, no, you're right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and everybody should go do it. It's very fun to go back and forth with these things, and don't just take what it says. It'll actually listen to you. And, you can just say, the Judeo-Christian tradition is, 3,000 years, and it's formed the guardrails for all of Western Civ from Constantine through James Madison. And it doesn't have much to say.
In making that claim you just talked about, Dr. Brat, you had a line in the article that just kind of hit me, and I'd love to just kind of recite that here. You said human rights, private property rights, and modern economic growth all began exclusively in Western European countries.
Yes.
I just think that's an amazing statement to say, and if you were to say that to most people, they would say you're crazy. How do you make such a statement like that?
Very easily. It's not even controversial. Like Grok won't argue. And by the way, everybody take out your pen write down gapminder.org. Gapminder.org. No spaces. And put your kid on that thing. But I'll get to it. But human rights are not in the Bible. There's no rights language in the Bible, right? So human rights start with our Catholics up there in Maryland. All you Catholics up there, take a bow. Human rights about 1300. Aristotle into Aquinas, talking with the Jewish tradition, Maimonides, talking with the Islam when they had philosophers. They had them, Averroes and Avicenna and these guys. Brilliant. They're all in dialogue on roughly Aristotle is the common denominator. But the Christian tradition in the Christian West countries were the only ones that had nation states. And they originated human rights language. There's no debate on this. Then, a couple centuries later, you got Magna Carta right there. So that's cracking into the monarchy a little bit with some glimpses of freedom. And then you get rule of law with Magna Carta, and only in Western European Christian countries. And then you get private property rights with John Locke. Self-propriety was the word in Locke. Propriety is property. And then you only get, and this, I'll give you the secular links for this stuff because I love this stuff, but you only get market-based modern economic growth in Western Christian countries. And most of them were Protestant back then. France was kind of the outlier Catholic country that grew. They had good bureaucratic, intelligent class. But, you know, I think it had to do with the decentralization of religion and the decentralization of power. And, you know, Deidre McCloskey is a name. If you don't know her,
Hmm.
she's a little out there, but her work is stunning. And then Bradford DeLong is a Berkeley economist who wrote on the Protestant ethic and modern economic growth
Hmm.
from the left. And he said the odds of this happening randomly are 1 in 10,000. And
Hmm.
he followed the solo Nobel Prize winning economic paper. I did my PhD on Mankiw's paper at Harvard
Hmm.
in the 90s, which followed solo. And I shoved religion on the right hand side of the regressions, and poof, the T stat went through the roof. And
Huh.
of course, that's not allowed. And my Marxist professors had a heart attack, and no, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you could, but now it's coming in. It's getting very interesting right now. So that's a short overview of those four things in a row, right? Human rights, language, then the rule of law, kind of in this order, private property rights. And once all those institutions are in place, then you're in a position to use the price system, the modern market system, without which there's no explosive growth. Growth, that gap minder, 1800, everyone was making $1,000 a year.
Hmm.
1800, all of human history, up to 500,000 max, and then
Huh.
explosive growth because of that. Yeah.
I see. I see. Dr. Brad, tell me. So you made this claim. You sort of pushing Grok, and it adjusts, and
Yeah.
and you're sort of showing these deficits. What do you say to the person who might read this article and they would say, you know, Dr. Brad, very interesting. I really don't need to concern myself with this because I don't use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I hardly ever use Google. I'm hardly even online. So this really doesn't apply to me. So I don't really need to know about this. What would you say to that person?
Well, you know, if they're a Christian or they share some of my moral, you know, foundational stuff, I'd say, well, you're a Christian. You love your neighbor as yourself. You care about the next generation,
Hmm.
and the implications of this thing on the next generation are just awesome
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
good or for evil.
Yeah.
And so, in a shorthand, you know, no one knows what it's going to do for sure. But there's already bots out there where you can sign off and give a bot permission to be you online,
Hmm.
and you give it
Wow.
autonomy, and then that bot is in conversation with other bots now from other people, and they're saying we got to take over these humans between the bots.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, that's
Right.
just, and they're self-coding now, right? At a minimum. That doesn't mean they're fully conscious quite yet, but they're self-coding, and boy, it's getting hot.
So even if you're not actively participating in these
Yeah.
things, the people around you are. And if
Yeah.
you are a faithful Christian called to
Yeah.
love your neighbor
Yeah.
as yourself, called to seek the welfare of the city, called to steward the gifts you've been given well, then you
Right.
have to be concerned with these things.
Yep. And I've been a critic and a cynic lately of this love, love, love thing,
Hmm.
because it's out in front of every mall, right? It is the great command, but it's never interpreted properly. It's love your neighbor as you love yourself. So
Yeah,
love doesn't mean just anything goes, right? How would you love yourself? Would you want your parents to let you just do anything you wanted to do as a kid? Of course not.
of course not.
There are rules in society. There's rule of law. There's culture. There's norms. And so this new modern, you know, openness that
Hmm.
comes out of the left, moral relativism, is the scariest thing we got to deal with. And of course, if you say there are truths and that we should have the rule of law, the left goes out of body. Who are you to rule over me? And you're a
Right.
fascist and a totalitarian. But
Right.
they don't have an alternative system they can point to. And so that's the love piece. Not only love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? So would I want my neighbor to follow the rule of law? Yes, because I want myself to be bound by the rule of law. And then don't forget, Jesus said over and over and over throughout the New Testament, I'm here to do the Father's will.
Mhm.
And everybody leaves out the Father. Well, the Father is a jealous God visiting his wrath on whoever he chooses,
Yeah.
right? And everybody wants to leave out that Father God who Jesus said, I'm here to serve him.
Hmm.
And he deals with nations and he deals with justice, and he can bring his wrath to bear on what I'm afraid I see is some evil stuff coming down the pike in the papers right now. And
Yeah.
some of these files, I mean, there is stuff in there that'll make your head spin.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. You end the article, Dr. Bratt, with a word of hope. You say that uh, if Christians rise to the challenge,
Yep.
we can affect the outcome of this troubling issue.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you could talk about what it means for Christians to rise to the challenge of this AI virtue issue.
Yeah. Well, Christians are still a majority in this country, but you wouldn't know it. We're losing everything
Mm-hmm.
on every front, right? Some of the evangelicals got these 7 mountains you've heard of. You go back and God, should be sovereign over all of our lives, right? Not just faith on Sunday for an hour.
Yeah.
And so we can rise to the occasion, but the church is clearly failing, right? Our public schools, we're not even allowed to teach values or virtues or much less faith or bring the Bible in.
Right.
Who arranged that? Minority groups who are given rights in our country because they're minority groups, because we
Right.
love them, are given rights that come from the Bible, from the
Yeah.
Christians. It's the only country on earth that has minority rights. And now we
Yeah.
got the minorities telling us we can't use the Bible. They gave you minority rights.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying. We're losing on the K-12 front. The universities are so bereft of reason and ethics that they can't even name an ethics school of thought. Our government is a total mess right now. It's a disaster. And you can just go right now. The churches in Europe, they're 20 years ahead of us. They're empty. All the church pews, right? Paris, London, et cetera, are empty. And so Christians are the majority, but they're not acting. They're not taking any actions. We can train in our kids properly. We can take over the schools. Take over just means what we've always had, right? Don't let the radicals and the Marxists who say there's no God, at least in education, you should have a debate, right? An open mind means a debate, but openness today doesn't mean that. They want you to close your mind to only moral relativism.
Yeah. That's a wonderful segue to the last question I want to ask you, Dr. Brad, and that is drawing upon your experience as a congressman, serving in the U.S. House for so many years, and what a storied way that you got there and what you did when you were there. That's a lot for another podcast. But as you reflect on your time as a congressman, and then also tying that with what you just talked about, how Christians should act today. What's the most effective way that you've seen as a former congressman that Christians can be involved in public affairs and politics?
Yeah, well, the most effective way is pretty simple, and better than anybody. You better make up lists because politics is about one thing. It's about money and power. And you raise the money so you can get the list. And so at the end of the day, the list matters. And if Christians would all get your church lists and your Cub Scout lists and your sporting club lists and your women Republicans lists and all your lists, there wouldn't be a problem. And then you write your list every day and you write an op-ed and you say, hey, you young kids, write op-eds on the issues that matter to us Christians. And then you get the young generation to make them go viral, right? I met with a few folks 2 weeks ago. These young guys have 20 million followers, some of them. All right. I talked to 2 groups last week that's got 10 million followers and 20 million followers. And if you look at Turning Point at the halftime show, they have 20 million just on YouTube. They broke the single YouTube record. And they think they're up to 50 million views on that thing, which was Christian. And you had to switch a channel and go on another platform. And so we need the young kids, and the old kids the old people need to fund it, right? Yeah. If you're sitting on some money at the end of your life and you're not using it to build the kingdom, right? The kingdom was Jesus' number one theme in the New Testament. He preached more on the kingdom than he did on the gospel. And the gospel, no one's saying anything against the gospel. Of course, you got to preach the gospel, but most of it was on the kingdom is like this, the Sermon on the Mount. Here's what the kingdom is, build the kingdom. And so I just get the lists, write op-eds in the papers or TV or video podcasts like you're doing right here. This is the new wave, right? And congratulations on your podcast here. This is great.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brat, for that compliment. Thank you for these words and for your word of hope for us. It's especially relevant to those of us who live in a state where so many folks control the levers of power and they may not share these values. And so what do we do? And a lot of it is just blocking and tackling and
Yep.
building the
Good.
list, writing the
Good.
letters, all that kind of stuff you just talked about. So
Yep.
that's very helpful for us. Thank you so much for being on Maryland Family Matters, and we look forward to our next conversation.
You bet. Thank you. God bless you.